And what's, oh, it's, yeah, perfect. That's fab. So as I say, might have some people that join and we'll just submit them as we go along. But we will share the recording with you afterwards, for people who want to catch up with it another time. Thank you very much for joining, though. We really appreciate those of you who are able to come today. I'm really excited to hear more and share with you all more about the work that Rachel and Gerry have been doing. I was very fortunate to work previously with Gerry on the Smarties project with Rose Vincent at Edinburgh University. So we've had some experience of doing challenging some of what people think about co-production and dementia, which is very exciting. But I was really excited to see that you'd produced this book, Gerry and Rachel, together, and so we're going to hear more about that today and more about your experiences. I'm going to say very little. This is just one of the webinars that we do about partners in research and people with lived experience of dementia or other neuroprogressive conditions. And if you have any questions about the work we do or what we're trying to do, our contact details will be available in the chat and they're available online. But I will stop talking and hand over to Rachel and Gerry, if that's okay. And you can introduce yourselves and say as much or as little about yourselves as you would like. All right.
Thank you, Rosie. Rachel, I'm going to ask you a few questions. That's okay. First, I suppose you introduce yourselves there. My name is Gerry King. Everybody calls me Gerry. I am 60 years old and I was diagnosed with young onset dementia at the age of 55. Apparently I'm 61 now, not 60, so that's fine. Rachel?
I am Rachel from Boom Saloon. I might not tell you my age, but we have had the pleasure of working with Gerry and Stan for a number of years now, and creating this book has been a real pivotal part of this work. So excited to dive into it today. I will touch on more about our work in depth shortly, but one of the big things that we do is showcase what people with dementia still can do. So with that in mind, when we do our Q&As, we tend to split them between Gerry and I doing both the questioning and the answering, because that's the thing that we're both still able to do. So yeah, I have it noted down that Gerry, you might be kicking things off if that's still okay with you.
I might be taking something off, did you say?
As in, I have the first question.
Yes. You had me worried for a minute there. Yeah, Rachel, it would be great to set the scene by sharing a little more about Boom Saloon. And how would you describe it?
Thank you, Gerry. Boom Saloon, for anyone who doesn't know, is a global media movement to democratize creativity for good. We are driven by our international membership, and we explore the UN's Sustainable Development Goals through the lens of creativity. So we do this across a media ecosystem of print magazines, online features, newsletters, and events. And all of these fund the community projects that are really the beating heart of what Boom Saloon is all about. We've been doing this for a number of years now, so we've had the incredible privilege of working with a number of great talents who happen to be facing challenges such as substance abuse, homelessness, forcible displacement. But our current project is all about rewriting the story of dementia.
Yeah, lovely. Can you tell us a little more about Boom Saloon's work to rewrite the story of dementia? What sparked you to do this?
This is actually a story that I never know if we should potentially tell a little bit more publicly. It is quite small and quite personal, but it actually was all sparked from a single conversation with a very old friend when we were driving through Glasgow many years ago. And he was telling me about his grandfather who had died after being diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And when he was telling the story, he said upon diagnosis, his family felt very aware of the situation. There were a number of people with medical backgrounds in the family. They had caught the diagnosis fairly early on. His granddad was still able to stay at home, and the family would go in a couple of times a week to visit him. And everyone said the same thing. They always said, we know that he's still very sharp and very with it because we consistently see him doing the crossword each and every week. And that was their test of thinking that everything was okay. And in less than 6 months, he had passed away. And it was only after that point that the family went round to the home to pack everything up, and they found stacks and stacks of newspapers. And it was then that they looked close enough to realize that it was the same single word that had been written over and over again. And it's just one of those things that really stuck in my brain. And, you know, at the time, I didn't think that much of it, but it just wouldn't shift. And this idea of what it is to be living with dementia and how that message is portrayed to others when we live within an aging population. I'm sure everyone on this call here will know what's happening with the numbers and how things are skyrocketing, but there's still within the public at large a lot of, well, a severe lack of information. And the information that is there tends to often not come from those with lived experience. So over many years of co-creating things with the likes of Stand and people who were undertaking their own dementia journeys, this really got refined. And actually, it was the work of Nicole Fernandez that really kind of was the final piece of the puzzle in this. And that really crystallized how our work to rewrite the story of dementia is about starting to redress mainstream media's narrative of what that looks like when it is solely about incapacity and loss and what's taken away from you. It's been so incredible to work with people like Gerry to see actually this is what still can be done and this is what can be brought to the fore. So that's what all of our work is about. We work with people living with dementia and kind of unlock their stories to help to rewrite dementia through their words.
Very good, thank you. How did the publication of The Palm in the Spider's Hand come to be?
This was a little bit of a bonkers one. So I already mentioned we do a lot of work with publications. We make a number of magazines. We've just started to make some books. And we were speaking to Canon about the work that they do with both printing and photography and all of the different things that Canon does. And they have a big print exhibition coming up called Drupa, where they have massive commercial printers the size of whole buildings that print at unimaginable speed, and they need to print to showcase what they can do, but quite often, I hate to say it, they print a lot of things that are pulped at the end of the day because they just need to create something to be shown then and there. So we were having a discussion with them. We obviously have this focus on sustainability, including environmental sustainability. We kind of suggested, you know, maybe you could print something that didn't get pulped and something that would be of use to someone. And they came back and said, well, you've mentioned doing this dementia work. We had started to amass a number of poems from all different people from Stand. But we always knew that Gerry in particular was someone we would love to have done something with. We just hadn't been able to do that ourselves before. But then the opportunity came along with Canon and we managed to connect the dots. So In the Palm of a Spider's Hand was printed at Drupa. And yeah, then we had some copies come to us, which we're now in the throes of selling, which is a real privilege. But I'm really keen to maybe flip things back to you a little bit, Gerry, and hear from your side of things. If you could maybe chat everyone through how our two worlds collided.
Yes. If I remember rightly, Rachel, we collided during lockdown. We were starting new workshops, and one of the workshops was writing and poetry. I think we'd been inspired by Irene, who had done a poetry course previously, and I thought that would be really quite nice. So we met on Zoom during lockdown, and we were encouraged to write down our thoughts and feelings and just basically words. I must admit, when I first started, I thought, oh, I'm a man. Men don't write this sort of rubbish, and it's. I wasn't keen. I wasn't keen at all. But actually, once I got into the process of writing and writing down my thoughts, I found it very therapeutic. It was a way of letting my emotions out onto paper. And I was very grateful for that opportunity, Rachel, so thank you.
No, you're very welcome. It's our privilege. Apologies, I'm somewhat getting blinded by the sun. Hopefully not be too distracting on that side of things. I wanted Gerry, if you would be happy to tell us a little bit more about your life before we started working together. I know you had some quite creative backgrounds in both music and architecture. Could you tell us a little bit more about those?
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, I was diagnosed with young onset Alzheimer's at the age of 55. Prior to that, I was working full-time with a Fife Council in the architects department, where I'd been working for 32 years. So art was always in my blood. When I was young at school, I used to love to draw. I used to love drawing cartoons, and that was what I wanted to be when I left school, a cartoonist. But unfortunately, there was nothing out there at the time, which made me decide to go into architecture instead, because that would still allow me to do my drawing of sorts. I was also into music a lot. I played in quite a few bands. I played in a band called The Rock and Roll Was Never Like This Band, and truth be told, rock and roll was never like this band. We were absolutely awful. But hey ho. My next band was a punk band called The Distorts, which were quite good. We were kind of based loosely on the Skids at the time, and I was the singer. And then after that, I played in a band called Hotline to Moscow, where I played keyboards and backing vocals. So I've always been musically inclined, a bit lyrically inclined, and I suppose arty-farty in that sort of way as well. But as I got employed, life takes over, and all that just fell aside, and I never looked at it again. I was working full time, got married, we had children, and all your time is spent working to make money, to make sure that you can keep a roof over your family's head. And I never looked at it again until the opportunity came with yourself, and it was quite amazing to get back into that routine again. Like.
That's fantastic. And I think it is fair to say that you can definitely be considered a dementia advocate these days. And I'm always quite blown away by how bravely and how humanly you tell your story. I know maybe some people on this call might know of this, but if there's anyone who doesn't, are you happy to maybe touch on what that journey looked like around the time of your diagnosis?
Yeah, absolutely, no problem at all. When I was diagnosed, here in Fife where I live, there was absolutely nothing for people living with mild to moderate stage and under the age of 65 with dementia. Everything was set up for people older and further down the line in the dementia journey. At the first start, I found that quite difficult to cope with, and probably spent the first 5-6 weeks sitting in a house, looking at four walls, and truth be told, contemplating suicide. It was there wasn't any point getting up in the morning. I'd lost my job, I'd lost my driving license, and all the freedoms associated with that. I'd lost 32 years worth of work colleagues and 40 odd years worth of personal friends who just stopped coming round. I think partly because of the stigma that surrounds dementia, they weren't quite sure how to act or how to talk to me, and also partly because with my personal friends anyway, we met up most weekends and had a bit of drink and set the world to right. And because I'm not allowed to drink anymore, I can't be involved in that so much, so I don't get invited. So I think that's partly to do with it as well. So I got into quite a dark place, but then I was lucky. We heard of an amazing lady called Ruth who was doing a dementia awareness presentation in a local village, just a couple of miles from where we stayed. So we, Trish and I and the children went along, listened to what Ruth had to say, and it was really, really interesting. And the kids surprised me because they knew a lot more than what I actually thought they would. And from that day, really, Ruth and I struck up a really good friendship. And we went around all over Fife doing dementia awareness presentations. And over the past few years, we've probably done about, we've made over 300 Fife businesses dementia friendly and well over 3,000 people dementia friends. So yeah. And although I had that, it still wasn't quite enough. Trish and I were still at a kind of at a loss because we didn't have anyone to speak to with regard to young onset dementia. And in Fife, we're quite lucky. We have what's called a post-diagnostic support nurse. So we approached her and asked her if we could speak to some more of her clients. We just needed to speak to people who were of a similar age and a similar stage of us. I'd been to a couple of Alzheimer's Scotland workshops, and for me they were awful. They're set up for people a lot older and a lot further down the line in the dementia journey. And to be honest, when I saw that, I thought, oh my God, this is what I've got to look forward to again, sort of thing. So we needed something different. Luckily enough, Maggie agreed. And one Friday afternoon, there was about 15 couples met at the Alzheimer's Scotland hub in Kirkcaldy. And these were 15 couples who'd never met each other in their life. And within about half an hour, the room was full of laughter, talk, tears. And these were people who just kind of got it, knew exactly what was going on, knew how the other ones felt and what they were going through. And from that day, STAND was formed. STAND is a peer support group, which is facilitated by people living with mild to moderate stage dementia. And we provide support to people who are worried about dementia, or who might be going through the process of being diagnosed, or have been diagnosed and don't know where to turn, and their wives, husbands, and families. We do that through workshops. Our ethos is not to entertain, but to enable and empower people with dementia and their families to live as well as they do. And that keeps me extremely busy. I could go on and on, but I don't know what time like. So, but yeah, that's basically what I've been doing since like.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you know, there's so many extraordinary points in there that you just say right off the cuff. You know, 300 businesses, 3,000 dementia friends. It's such an accomplishment. I really think, it's extraordinary work. So delighted to witness that and to get to be a part of it. Something that really strikes me when you speak, though, is this idea of just quite how much loss there was, whether we're talking about, you know, the loss of your creativity through adulthood and, you know, having a career, or how much is lost around diagnosis. And I think it's particularly striking when you speak to someone who gives so much back, and you benefit and make the lives of so many others better. I just wanted to kind of use that concept to touch on potentially what your book might give back to other people, because I do think it's one of, and I don't say this just because we published it, I genuinely believe it's one of the most poignant, powerful ways I've come across of someone putting words to what dementia actually is. So much of our work is trying to understand what that experience might possibly be like, but it's incredibly hard to try and to think on that when you aren't experiencing it yourself. But the way that you have with putting that into words is incredibly powerful and beautiful. And I just wonder if we could touch on a couple of the poems in particular. I mean, one of my favorites is Alzheimer's Is, and I know we've spoken about this before. I do find it very hard to read, but it definitely packs a punch. And I just wonder if you could share some of the thoughts around how you got from dementia to crocodiles and Venus flytraps and spiders. How did that come together?
Yeah, I've actually found the writing to be very therapeutic, Rachel. As my Alzheimer's is progressing, my actual emotions are changing, and I find it much more difficult to bring these emotions forward. But what I found is that as I'm writing, these emotions come out on the paper instead. And as I'm talking, I find it difficult to find the right words, but as I'm writing, it's easy and the words come really naturally. In the palm of a spider's hand, that came about because I was trying to describe what it felt like to be diagnosed with a long-term terminal illness, as such. And I was trying to put it into words that people could understand how it might feel. Being diagnosed with something that just piece by piece takes you away, bit by bit. until basically there's nothing of you left. And that's how that poem came about. It's the best way I could describe what it's like to be told, to be diagnosed and living with Alzheimer's. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. Thank you for sharing that. I wonder, from your side of things, what was the process of making the book like, and do you have any fun behind the scenes stories that you could maybe share?
I'm really grateful for the opportunity, truth be told. When you're diagnosed with dementia, the life's full of losses. And to be given opportunities to do things again just makes the whole world a brighter place. And it's lovely that people like yourself and Rosalie and that just invite you to do things. It's great that people have got the foresight to see that people living with dementia still can, rather than can't anymore. The book itself was fun to write. It was actually quite fun to send you the stuff. You'd asked for a lot of a copy of some of my poems, but unfortunately I was away on holiday in Tunisia with Trish at the time, and we were enjoying ourselves far too much. So I think I just sent you an email of all my poems, and you had to work from that to make it more difficult for yourself, like again, which is not the way things are usually published, like so. But it's been an absolute joy. I think the book looks fantastic. The design is brilliant. I'm just happy with the whole thing. I'm happy that I've been involved with it, and I'm really, really humbled by the whole thing. It's been an amazing experience, which I would recommend to anybody with dementia to get involved with. It's been a way for me to express my feelings, how I feel, my ideas, my emotions, things like that, and it's been amazing.
Well, there you go. That makes it all worthwhile.
It does.
Yeah, from my side of things, yeah, it actually everything was texted to us from Tunisia.
Actually, yeah, it was text. That's right. Yeah.
A whole new way for us of making a book. So lots of fun and games on that side of things.
I was on holiday.
I know. But I think another thing that's important to mention, the book is really beautiful, and that's very purposeful. We didn't want it to necessarily look like, and actually this came up a lot when we spoke about the title, because Gerry, you'd initially said, oh, it probably should be my dementia diaries or my journey in dementia, and actually being able to say it can be anything you want it to be, I think is a really important part of the narrative. And we've had a number of people who have come to us and said, almost in a bit of a negative way, or it doesn't have dementia in the title, or it's not purple, or how are we supposed to know what it is? And actually that's a really key part of our work, in the nicest possible way. I think something incredibly valuable in almost tricking people into having these types of conversations. And if we can get an architect or a city planner or someone who has a real interest in design, who's actually building the cities of the future, who would be looking at design objects but wouldn't necessarily think to be looking at the words from someone with dementia, if we can get that into their hands and get them to start to understand these experiences, I just think we open up a whole new world of possibility that's so important. So that's a large part of the thinking behind the design and the pitch and the tone, and why a number of certain decisions have been made as they are. And yeah, we've said from day one, I don't think it's an incredible poetry debut from someone living with dementia. I think it's an incredible poetry debut.
Sorry, Nicola, I think you're absolutely right. I do a lot of things with regard to dementia, a lot of activism and that sort of stuff, and I'm involved every day with dementia. And sometimes it's nice just to get away from that. And this has given me the opportunity. I look at the book and I think, wow, yeah, that's me. But it's been my project, well, our project, if you know what I mean. But it's been ours. It's not a dementia project. It's been an opportunity for me to just express how I feel on paper, and whatever comes out of that will be brilliant. Like so, but yeah.
Definitely. I know I love the layers of personality to it. So for anyone, well, no one would know because I haven't, again, actually said this publicly, but the blue is actually in reference to the blueprints that architects would work with. So there's a lot of little subtle nods to Gerry and everything that you've done so far in the book itself. But I wonder, Gerry, do you have any tips or advice for anyone who might like to try poetry and writing, but maybe feels a little bit afraid to start?
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, when you started the workshops, I just thought it wasn't for me. I thought men don't do poetry or do writings. That women do that, like, again, sort of thing. Men don't do that. Give it a go. Give it a go. I look at things totally different now to what I used to. We've been encouraged to write about the most inanimate objects, or what we see out windows, or what we see when we're walking along the street and all that sort of stuff. And you do actually look at things in a totally different way. We were in Southwold just about a couple of months ago, spreading my mum's ashes, my dad's ashes off Southwold Pier. The whole family was there, and because of my mobility issues, I can join them, but the family went away to the pub and the shops, as they do. And my elder sister Judith and myself were left on the bench on the end of the pier, which was fine. We were happy to do that. And while we were there, I was just looking around, and a poem started springing up in my mind. And I actually wrote a poem of what was happening that day. And that's the way you look at things now. Well, that's the way I look at things now. And I find myself writing more and more. And it's my history, if you know what I mean. My poetry started to vary from how I felt about dementia and what it's like to live with dementia to sometimes what's happening on a daily basis. And some of it's quite fun, and some of it's quite serious. It's amazing, and I would recommend anybody to give it a try. Getting your feelings out on a piece of paper, it's beats medication.
Fantastic. Just one last question for me, which is a bit of an obvious one, but I do love asking it. What is your favourite poem from your book, and why is it your favourite
one? I have one called the Cluny Oak. That was probably one of my first poems. And in the workshops, we were asked to just think about an object that springs into your mind, and write something about it. And for some strange, it was the middle of summer anyway, and for some strange reason, this Cluny Oak had been on my mind actually for quite a while. And I think it's because it's a huge oak tree, beautiful oak tree, and it's ancient, it's old, and it sits right on this corner of a junction on the back road to a town called Kirkcaldy from Glenrothes. And it's massive, and it just sticks out and looks amazing. And we'd passed it quite a few times going backwards and forwards to Kirkcaldy, and I've always been amazed on how beautiful it looked like. But it also had quite a sad story to it as well, and that's what I wrote about in my poem about it. Yeah, and I probably find that one of the most poignant ones, like, because it actually tells a story.
I love that one. I think we maybe have Ed Sheeran to thank for that one.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
To clarify, not the real Ed Sheeran, just a little nickname for one of our workshop leaders. Bill, I think, Gerry, there might just be one last question that you were going to ask, and then
yes, just one for yourself, Rachel. Just one more question from me. What's next for the work to rewrite the story of dementia, Rachel?
So we have a number of Gerry's books available to sell, so that's our big priority at the moment. Any profits raised from that will further our work to rewrite the story of dementia, and we've just popped some exciting bundles on our website as well. So that's the current focus, along with a pretty ambitious finale. So this will be the last publication that we make in this space for now. Again, it is surprisingly personal for a small team who are normally quite private, but it actually is the story of me and my gran through her dementia diagnosis. Initially, it was going to be a book of poetry. We very quickly found out she is not a poet, God love her. So instead, it is a living recipe book which tells the story of our lives together throughout her dementia diagnosis and what we are living through at the moment. But what's most ambitious and experimental and exciting and terrifying is that we are working with disappearing ink to tell this story. Yeah. We have a very specific narrative because we would never say that she was diagnosed and she has started to disappear. Instead, the book emulates the physical degeneration of the brain that happens during the dementia journey. There is a really beautiful narrative around the fact that when the books arrive, they all look similar in the same way that you could look at a room full of humans and not be able to visually tell who will be diagnosed with dementia. And also in the same way that we know human interaction can affect an individual's dementia journey, the ink itself actually reacts to air and light. So the more that people interact with the book, the more they can shape and change how things disappear and what that narrative takes. Each book will also be slightly different and fade and alter in slightly different ways, in the same way that we know no two dementia journeys will take the same route. So yes, it's a very ambitious, very experimental one. We went into it quite gung-ho, thinking you can probably get disappearing ink in WH Smith. Turns out there is one supplier in the entire world who is a quite kooky man called Carl, based in California. So we've had all sorts of fun and games, shipping disappearing ink backwards and forwards between us and California and doing all sorts of different tests. And yeah, lots of craziness come to be. But the book is written, edited. We are 4 out of 6 chapters through the final tests and being ready to go. So that should be hopefully coming in January of next year.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the idea with the disappearing ink was fantastic. Like, what a way it does help to describe dementia, really. Again, slowly disappearing. And yeah, I thought it was an excellent idea.
Yeah, that's the plan. I mean, bless, doing it with my gran, I'll show her 3 different options. She'll be like, they're all great. So, you know, a couple of new layers of trickiness to work with. But yeah, that's it from us in terms of the kind of questions we had planned, Rosie.
Yeah.
Well, firstly, thank you so much. I was properly engrossed in your discussion and the back and forth. I think you can really tell the kind of working relationships and friendship that you've developed in this process, but also just, you know, actually the story of, you know, when you started talking, Gerry, you were talking kind of about loss, but actually it's kind of also shows just how much you've now gained and the amount you've done for dementia activism, but also, you know, in turning your experience from a very dark place to finding light where you could, I think is a really powerful and motivating kind of story for others, because I think it's very understandable given the way the stigma and things around the condition that people do experience those dark places. And I think it's really, really powerful to see how you have come out of that. And I was thinking when you're saying, you know, how men don't do poetry, and I was like, but actually I was wondering if have you had much feedback from kind of, I suppose, men in general about reading the book or challenging their assumption about poetry? Have you had any feedback from anyone about that?
Surprisingly enough, yes, I have. And the men that I have spoken to have actually come up to me and have been quite emotional about the book. And they've been quite forward in the way that how the book has affected them, how they've thought about dementia, which is what I wanted. At the end of the day, I wanted people just to get some sort of feeling of what it's like to live dementia. And yes, lo and behold, men have actually are reading the book and actually coming up to me and saying, "What a fantastic book! And some amazing stuff in it." Yeah,
absolutely. And don't get me wrong, I think all genders will, I'm sure, love it, but I think it's very interesting what you're saying about that not maybe even just not thinking that poetry was something that would work for you, but actually looking back in your kind of history and your I know we've spoken a lot about kind of your time in bands, and
Yep.
I've been in bands, and that's something I know we connected on early on, and there's been a lot of fun, but actually that kind of lyricist, I suppose, and that kind of different ways of telling stories, actually this feels like it's kind of created a new language for you to do that, but the language of poetry, and I think
yeah. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say it's something that I certainly was associated as, like, that's what you get taught how to do at school, and then you're either good at it or bad at it. And actually, what you've shown us, that's not the case at all.
No, not at all.
You know.
Yep. And it just shows. It gives you the opportunity to look at things in a totally different light as well, which is what I've found. When you talk poetry at school, it's Mary had a little bike, she wrote on the grass, sort of thing like again. But what we've been taught through the workshops is how to look at things in different ways, and during that process, you're actually starting to bring out your feelings, which to me has been amazing. I don't want to sound soft on them because I'm not. I'm a hard man, right? But but yeah, it's been really good for me. It's been really good for me. Like, it's given me a place to put the dark thoughts if I want to, place the good thoughts that I want to as well. Like, again, so yeah, I mean, a lot of my poems, some are dark, but most of them are good. Like, again, so yeah.
Absolutely.
We had a really nice story. Sorry if it's okay to chime in. From we very kindly got some cash from Age Scotland to do a little mini book tour to launch the book. And we tacked on an extra event down in London, which unfortunately we couldn't take Gerry to, but it was the first one we did. And it was great because we did a lot of what I mentioned earlier, whereby it was no one from within the dementia community, and everyone was a bit, oh gosh, what is this? We didn't really know it was a thing about dementia. And it's actually someone from the FT who came along, who I know from very much the media world, not in any way dementia healthcare world. And he came along, and I kind of thought that he was quite into it at the time. And he texted me in the middle of the night, that same night, saying, I've just stayed up all night and read it cover to cover. And I just thought, like, wow, that's what it can do when you get into the hands of someone who's heard these types of stories before and now suddenly feels engaged to find out a little bit more and start to understand what that might be like for other people. Also, the male side of things, interestingly.
And I think what I found with the book as well is the fact that it's got people back in contact with us as a couple. I mean, there's a lot of couples that we haven't seen for a long time, purely because of the dementia diagnosis. But I know Trish has been getting messages from old friends saying they bought the book, and because they've read the book, they now understand a bit more, and they now find the words to be able to talk to us. Whereas before, that's why they stopped talking to us, because they didn't know what to say. But and that's great. Like,
I was going to say that. I mean, I know it's a very personal question, but how have you found that people who have kind of, who left your life essentially because they didn't know how to deal with it, coming back into your life because they've now learned a new way? How have you found that? Because I can imagine that comes with quite a lot of conflicting emotions in terms of the amount of loss you experienced and that kind of coming back round.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. One half of you says, well, why didn't you come round before? And why leave it this long? But probably the greatest feeling I've got is the sense that the book's done exactly what I was hoping it would do. Change someone's view on what it's like to be living with dementia, and hopefully it gives them the strength to overcome their fear, because that's basically what it is. And with overcoming their strength, they will find it easier to accept the fact that their friend has got dementia. And that's exactly how I see the book has worked.
That's really exciting. And as you say, it's really, I mean, you should obviously both be incredibly proud of what you've achieved with it. And I think, as you say, Rachel, getting into new spaces that often when you're there with, say, a research hat on, or dementia hat on, for example, people might just go, oh, I don't know about that, or that's not for me. And I think it quite gently kind of welcomes you to this world while saying this is part of the story, but it's absolutely not the whole story. And I think that's so important to have that, and to get people who maybe didn't realize that they should be interested in this topic interested in it. And it's really exciting to hear, obviously, the other things that are going to be coming out using these creative methods that have not been seen but in many ways before, which I think is really exciting to hear that's going on. So yeah, I'm obviously, I feel very honoured to have obviously worked with you, Gerry, and know what light and energy you bring to the room. And I think there's a real legacy in what you've created here, in terms of showing who you are from all these different sides, but also hopefully reminding you that there might be things that you can no longer do, but there's these opportunities that you have absolutely taken and run with. And I think that's such a shining positive example to others, that what they choose to do with their journey might vary, but to go for it, and to make that happen. So I think it's really exciting. I put the link to the book in the chat. I don't know if anyone who is on the call, I know that cameras haven't been working, but I don't know if anyone on the call had any additional questions they wanted to ask. So I will see if anyone puts their hand. I don't know. Teams is not the most user-friendly platform, but if you do have any questions and you want to pop them in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, as I say, I just think it's really great to, even knowing so many of your achievements, to hear them and just go like, it's incredible. I mean, I would be buzzing to be able to say and achieve those things. So it's oh, that's a very nice request. So hold on, I'll just see. We've got a couple of. I'll see what Tracy's asking too. But do you have a copy of the book near you?
I just happen to have one right here.
How do you feel about possibly reading one of the poems out loud for Absolutely, yeah, that would be what the that's so in the chat. Rachel has said, would you, so whichever one you would like to read, there is no, feel free to pick whichever you fancy, and obviously if you feel comfortable reading it, we would love to hear one.
I will read you the title poem, if that's okay, which is in the palm of a spider's hand, if I can find
Absolutely.
it. There we go. Okay. Yes, this is a poem that the title of the book has been taken from, and it's a poem about how I was trying to describe what it's like to live with a long-term terminal illness. Actually, I was trying to put it into words and more natural things that people would have probably understand what they might feel like, and it goes a bit like this. Alzheimer's is like walking on still waters laced with rough-skinned crocodiles, patiently waiting for endless ripples, my eyes fixated on their smiles, enticed into a feeding frenzy, tearing flesh clean off my bones, until they've satisfied their hunger and every piece of me is gone. Alzheimer's is like a peaceful Venus flytrap, bathing in the tropical sun, calmly waiting for a gentle touch. In a flash, the trap is sprung, slowly and gently cradled, vice-like bars squeezing my teeth, enveloped in a shroud of darkness, leading to a long and lingering death. Alzheimer's is like a high-flying spider floating gently on the breeze, looking to spin its deadly web high amongst the branches of trees. Its soft and silky web of deceit, spun from its body strand by strand, drained of life inside a silken tomb, held in the palm of a spider's hand. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay, and fantastic. And hopefully you can see that there's applause coming up on the screen there too. Thank you so much. It's such an absolute pleasure to hear you share one of your poems, but also for you the imagery that that one poem creates.
Yeah.
So you can picture it so clearly. It's beautiful. And I think you should just be incredibly proud of yourself. Is there anyone else I can see? I think Tracy, you typing a question. I can't quite tell. This is we've got a brilliant, well done, Gerry. But as I say, we will put this recording up for people to see. And as I say, the link to your book is there. But I'm just so grateful that you were willing to join us and talk a bit more about the work. And Rachel, do keep us updated on your disappearing ink. I think that's really exciting. But thank you so much for taking the time this afternoon. As I say, I know it's difficult when not everyone can come at the same time, but I know that they'll really value hearing from you, and your discussion was. I was completely gripped, so I kind of forgot that I was meant to come back and talk to you and ask questions, because I was having a lovely time just listening. But no, it's such a pleasure to have you, and I just think you've done such an amazing job, and so you should be really, really, really proud. And just keep us posted with any future work that you do. But thank you very much for coming.
No, thank